Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Shall we start today's session with the recitation of Al-Fatiha? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanirrahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim. Ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Assalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to everyone. You're welcome to today's webinar. Praise be to Allah. As you can see outside, it is such a beautiful morning. Alhamdulillah. And the temperature also is very cooling. So the morning in Shah Alam today is very nice, alhamdulillah. So I welcome all of you to today's webinar and thank you for spending your precious time to be with us this morning. A special thank to our distinguished and honorable speaker, Dr. 𝗪𝗲𝗍𝗂𝗧𝗪, for her willingness to be with us also. Although her schedule, I know, is very, very tight. So how are you, Dr. Siti? You okay?
Alhamdulillah, fine. Thank you, Prof. Zul.
Okay. So let me just first introduce myself. My name is 𝗔𝗀𝗶𝗃𝗲𝗏. I'm a faculty member in the Construction, Business and Project Management Division under the Faculty of Civil Engineering, UiTM, University Technology Mara. I have been asked to moderate this webinar today in my capacity as the chairman of the Complex Problem Committee in my faculty of Civil Engineering. So this committee was formed back in 2015, basically to address the findings of our EAC re-accreditation exercise in late 2013. The exercise found significant shortcomings with respect to the fulfillment of complex engineering problem and engineering activities required by EAC. So the function of the committee is basically to ensure our engineering program will completely and effectively fulfill the complex engineering problem and engineering activities requirement as stipulated engineering program learning outcomes. So we have more than 5 years experience, extensive one, on the ground, which we hope to share with all of you in our future webinars, and also in a book that we hope to be published by October this year. And of course, not to forget the immense contribution by our speaker today, who happened to be one of my committee members. And he was still with UiTM, but she was still with UiTM. So coming to today's webinar topic, acculturation of OBE, alternative assessment, adherence to complex engineering problem, and complex engineering activities. So there are basically 3 elements in this topic. The first one is the acculturation of OBE. So there may be some contention here, but as far as EAC is concerned, from their perspective, we have reached the stage of acculturation of OBE. But for some universities, may be at an earlier stage, may be lagging behind a bit. So this may be a contention here. Second element is the alternative assessment. With the coming of the COVID-19 pandemic, all of us have had to come up with alternative assessment. Be it we have opted for open book examination, or we have replaced our examination with assignments and coursework, or projects. So there are challenges that confront us when we make this change or this transfer. And of course, the third element of this topic today is adherence to complex engineering problem and complex engineering activities. So even before the COVID-19 pandemic, we already had challenges in actually trying to adhere to the complex engineering problem and complex engineering activities in our assessment, be it whether we choose to do it in our assignments, projects, or in our final exams. But with the coming of this COVID-19 pandemic, I think the challenges have somehow doubled, in trying to adhere to these requirements. So today's webinar is organized by the Academic Office and the Construction Business and Project Management Division of Faculty of Civil Engineering, University Technology Mara, Shah, and also with the Civil Engineering Department at our Pinang branch campus. So our technical person today, Dr. Suhaila from Pinang. So you're okay, Dr. Suhaila? So monitoring all three platforms today, live streaming at YouTube, Facebook, and of course, Google Meet, will be monitored by Dr. Hazrina and Dr. Chimazda. And most importantly, worth noting today is the selfless and tireless effort by the key person who is hosting our webinar today, who have made this session today possible, none other than Engineer Dr. Ch.Mazna Ahmad Isa. So thank you, Dr. Ch.Mazna. So the house rule for today, the talk will be about 45 minutes. Then we will open the session to question and answer at 11 for around 45 minutes. So questions shall be submitted on writing. Please state your name and university, and questions should be related to today's topic. So let me now introduce to our speaker for today. So our Dr. Siti Hamzah was formerly the Professor of Civil and Structural Engineering at the Faculty of Civil Engineering, University Technology Mara, Shah. So she has been a colleague of mine since 1984, but she retired in 2017, and since she has been appointed as the Director of EAD, the Engineering Accreditation Department, and ETAD, Board of Engineers Malaysia, since this year, 2020 until 2022. So Dr. Siti Howard is truly, I can say, a seafood in today's topic. She has been involved in OBE and of course in EAC for as long as I can remember. She has become a panel of EAC, and today she is with us to share on the topic of acculturation of OBE, alternative assessment, adherence to complex engineering problems, and complex engineering activities. So I welcome Dr. Siti. The word is yours, Dr. Siti.
Thank you very much, Prof. Zul. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to everyone. It is nice to be able to have this morning to share the experiences with UiTM. And thank you to Dr. Mazna and all the committee members who have made this possible, and for the faculty to have actually been able to host this particular session. This is basically an effort that is ongoing. I started first with UNIMAS, and then shortly later UMS called me in. And then we also have representation with UUM, and recently was with UTM. So the opportunity that we have with webinar is we are able to cater for a larger crowd, and we're able to get everyone on board. And there were a lot of questions at every time when I have this particular session. And it's very good that UiTM and even UTM managed to share this with the public. And this is also an applaud to the faculty. So first of all, I would like to congratulate the whole team for able to bring this up. And then I will be sharing with you the latest output from our IEM 2020 meeting that was held in, supposedly to be held in South Africa, but it was actually done on video conferencing. So without further ado, since I have about 40 minutes left, so may I have the first presentation document, Dr. Mazna? What I would like to bring the attention of all is on the guiding principle. And this guiding principle, at the time when we developed this guiding principle, it was a call that we made, and it was chaired by Prof. 𝗨𝗏𝗧𝗨. Prof. 𝗨𝗏𝗧𝗨 is on board. And when we come up with this guiding principle, the basis of the guiding principle is to go on the mood that acculturation of outcome-based education. Acculturation means that we should be saying that majority of the program are mature in outcome-based education. So when we move on, we were providing some guiding principle on the teaching, learning, and assessment and implementation during COVID-19. I believe at that time, I think the architect, Lembaga Architect Negara and Lembaga Architect Malaysia were also coming out with a guiding principle. So what we did here was to really focus on 5 elements of our teaching, learning, and assessment. But let me draw your first attention to our 2.1, I think. Can you scroll up so that we can, yeah. 2.1 is saying that all programs are to ensure attainment of the 12 program outcomes as stipulated in the manual or the standards. So I think all of the lecturers here on board, especially in Malaysia, you should know that we are now guided by our new standards or revised standard. We have standard 2020 and it has been effective since the 1st of May 2020. So there are certain elements of these particular standards that you must pay attention to. For instance, for EAC, we have the implementation or basically a strict implementation of our 3 PE or the 30% PE. And we also have a strict implementation of significant number of our laboratory should be under OEL. So it should be open-ended laboratory. So what is significant? Significant can be more than 50%. So we expect that most of the laboratory work should be done on open-ended system. However, once we go through the alternative assessment method that we have and in compliance to WP, you will realize that by right, all the laboratory work can be done using the open-ended system under the characteristics of WP. Now, under 2.1, it mentioned all alternative assessment must be designed or formulated based on the intended learning outcome. Therefore, by right, during COVID-19, we should not change our learning outcome. The learning outcome is the same because that has been our recipe. What may change is the assessment. Probably our previous assessment was having a face-to-face final exam. Now we need to change the final exam component into something else. Is it going to be an open book exam? Or is it going to be changed to as a PBL, which is still considered as a final exam? Because bear in mind, when we talk about assessment, when you talk about assessment, there are the formative assessment and there are the summative assessment. Anything summative that we always park as a final exam would comprise the whole 14 weeks or whatever, 12 weeks or maybe 10 weeks of study. And all of the learning outcome that is being designed for within that particular semester or within that particular quarter will be tested at the end of the semester or at the end of the quarter. And that examination is known as a summative exam. And that can be done in the form of a final exam, or it can be done also in the form of other kind of alternative assessment, which will cater for the summative result. So in this case, we also mentioned scenario or case study types of questions could be used as alternative to the psychomotor and affective POs during the COVID-19 pandemic. Please understand this particular statement rightly, because it do mention that during the COVID-19 pandemic. When we talk about psychomotor and affective domain, probably some of the psychomotor domain that you will get from your laboratory work would require you to do the real hands-on, the physical part of it. But somehow or other, because the laboratory session happened to fall during COVID-19 pandemic MCO, where you have the movement control order and students are not allowed to be in the university. So how can you really offer alternative assessment to the psychomotor domain? This is where I receive lots of questions. Will simulation be good enough? Yes, simulation can be used, but not all of the psychomotor domain can be done on simulation. So if you can't do the psychomotor domain via simulation, what should we do now? Are we saying that that's okay? Or are we saying that we should also provide gap analysis? So what EAC wants to see is, are you providing that gap analysis? Most probably what you will do is you will provide all of those laboratory work on simulation. Students may do some computer simulation work, or maybe do some kind of experiment via this computer modeling that they have. But if they do not have that feel, and if they don't really do it, you know that they are not getting the proper learning outcome, the intended learning outcome that was already designed in that particular course. So now things are getting better. Students are getting back into the university. There's nothing wrong by asking students to repeat those particular assessment. This time around, by doing the experiment, and even if the grade has been given out, there's nothing wrong by giving them to put up a reflection paper and get the understanding whether they are really learning and they are attaining all the learning outcome that it is intended for in that particular course. At the end of the day, if this psychomotor domain is affecting year 1 or year 2 students, bear in mind, students are going to undergo final year project. They may require these particular fields before they could actually embark on their final year project. So the gap analysis is something that EAC would like to see in the SAR document. Somehow or other, you will be undergoing your continuing cycle, and you will also be undergoing your new program, new cycle visit. Therefore, you will have to have a special section explaining what is the TLA that had been conducted, how is the QMS done internally to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So if the TLA is saying that you are doing the psychomotor domain and the affective domain by simulation, and you know that it is really important, especially for the technologies program and the diploma program, then they must do some gap analysis for this particular assessment that we have not been able to do during the COVID-19. And this particular mention is only during COVID-19 pandemic. Now that students are now allowed to go back into the campus, so by right, we should be saying that between 1 to 2 semesters of learning is affected for psychomotor and affective. And if students are about to graduate, then maybe you can't do much, but definitely there will be an impact. And it is good for the faculty to study this particular impact, whether they are really getting all these intended learning outcome during the COVID-19 if you do our learning via online. All right, so that is one item that I need to highlight, 2.1. And you must also realize that any mention of the accreditation, it shall not be compromised. So in whatever alternative assessment that you are using, therefore you must ensure that the accreditation must not be compromised. So can we go 2.2? If you look at 2.2, All programs are advised to implement substantial equivalent assessment to the current assessment. It's not saying that you can go away with whatever alternative assessment that we have. I do have questions asking, can we just go by a multiple choice question for our final exam? Can we do that? And can that be considered as equivalent assessment to the current assessment? I think it is fair for the university to ask your internal quality system whether that is really a good alternative to your assessment in comparative to your current assessment. Because if you ask us at EAC, what we are looking at, how do you really attain your 12 program outcome? If you think that your MCQ is good, go ahead with your MCQ. But then again, like I said, is it really substantial equivalent assessment to the current assessment? How can you change something that you are really going to go for PBL with a multiple choice question? So I think that would require some how you can really go ahead and construct your MCQ for your final examination paper. So the continuous assessment implemented will be continued with take-home exams and assignments. When we talk about take-home exams and assignment, that is also another thing. Right? You need to realize whether it is going to attain accordingly as what we have mentioned in 2.1. The program is expected to undertake precautionary measures in handling integrity issues. This is also another issue that we at the university need to realize. How do we handle integrity issues? Do you get the students to sign the pledge? Do you look at whether students are supposedly to have everything to be done with the video on and so forth? So therefore, it is not possible really to cater for integrity issues 100%. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt now.
Yeah.
Can everyone please mute their mic? You're getting echoes here. Dr. Chan Han-Seng, please mute your mic, please. Thank you. Proceed, Dr. Han.
Okay. All right. So shall we move to 2.3 is also another issue. How do you ensure that all students, I'm saying here all students, at least have a minimum access to all the e-learning system? So I think we've heard recently the case of a student who has to climb a tree just to get the internet connection. That is how poor it is. And she has to sit for her final exam. So that is a situation that we have in our country. So how can the university ensure that all of the students are getting that? And if you want to give a final exam, which is supposedly to be a take-home exam or online exam, how many hours do you think is good? Would there be any disruption of internet line connectivity? Will it take like 1 hour to download all the graphic? And how long will it take for them to upload back to your platform so that they can submit their examination answers? So all of these questions in 2.3 is under the purview of the university. We at EAC will just do the triangulation with the students, whether they are having problem with this or not. And if they are having problem, then we see that universities are not really addressing this particular issue rightly. Yeah, because otherwise it will definitely affect your TLE, your teaching, learning, and assessment. Okay, in 3.0, you will see that we have only highlighted 5 main issues. The first one is the final year project. We do have questions about how does the final year project be done if it is not going to be able to be done in the laboratory. So we consider that any ongoing final year project at the final semester, if they are focusing on the experimental project, and still be carried out with possibility of extension of time to complete. This is in due recognition between the supervisor and the student. However, if they feel that they need to change that into a simulation, then everything has to be realigned properly for a simulation work to obtain the intended program outcome. Yeah, so we already have highlighted these under final year project. Industrial training, I think for the bachelor engineering program, it wouldn't be much an issue because we have given the jurisdiction of if it is halted and students need to continue after semester 8, then it is possible for them to do so because it's only affecting about 8 weeks of duration. So then it can be done. For those who have done 2 weeks and the remaining 6 weeks is done under WFH, that is work from home, that is also possible. However, when you talk about the diploma program and the technology program, then the university or the program has to give a deeper thought on whether students have actually attained the intended practice-oriented component for technology and for the diploma. Yeah, because the diploma would definitely have to go for 16 weeks and the minimum of 12 weeks. For the degree is a 24 weeks. So therefore it's a long duration. So therefore they really need to identify whether they have actually achieved the intended learning outcome.
Ni kan bila aku buka
okay. Now the next one will be on the courses with extensive laboratory work. I think I've discussed this a bit when I mentioned about 2.1. Next we can go on the integrated design project. This is again another issue that has been discussed quite a lot because it mentioned about the teamwork effort. How can the teamwork effort and the complex engineering activities characteristics to be carried out? We are not giving you any prescriptive on this, any prescription on this, but the university is supposed to come out on means and ways on how to identify teamwork effort and complex engineering activities are continued accordingly. Because this is done to assess teamwork. PO, one of the PO is addressing on teamwork. So therefore, you need to address this accordingly. Okay. Similarly, for IDP, if you can't, for some, probably for mechanical, for electrical, they need to come up with prototype. So probably at this time around, they would only be able to produce their prototype design and equivalent. They could have done some simulation work through some computer software. And then again, if you need to realize, some of the computer software is only available on the at the university ground on the campus. And it can only be available through intranet. So this kind of computer software which is not available where students is at their own home ground must also be looked at on how these are possible to be replaced with some other softwares. Probably some of the intended learning outcome or the program outcome do specify certain kind of softwares. Probably if I say that in our IDP, we say that students need to use STEAM. If we don't have STEAM for student license, then student may not be able to use STEAM. So then again, these are the activities that the universities must relook into on how the alternative assessment can be used to address whatever has been mentioned in the intended learning outcome or in the program outcome. Okay, 3.5 is the most important section, which is the final exam. I think most of you have done your final exam, and some may undergo their final exam now. And the recent talk that we had with UTM was actually focusing on open book examination. I hope some of you have been able to view that particular webinar. And I think if you can't, you can actually try to write to CEE UTM and request for their recorded version. And you can actually check back on how the final examination using open book examination valid as a consideration for the final exam. All right. So these are basically the main function of our guiding principle, and we specifically mention only on these 5 items, and all of these 5 items will also have a relation to our WP and also our EA. And this has been used quite extensively. And for those who are actually undergoing new cycle, probably words have spread around for all the new cycle program. They are supposed to submit their SAR, their old SAR, the 5 years or the 6 years ago SAR, plus the supplemental document addressing what is their TLA according to our guiding principle. So we are going to bring all those new cycle accreditation on board our ADM, which is supposedly to be on the 15th, and we will consider giving them a 1-year blanket accreditation. Therefore, their expiration of 2020 will now be bring over to 2021. So we will not be doing any accreditation to all the new cycle, but we will only proceed with the new program and only the deferred cases. So that will reduce our operation this particular year because of COVID-19. So this particular guiding principle have been a good indicator to how our industry or our stakeholder is taking seriously about the alternative assessment. Is there any question? I will take 1 or 2 questions first, Prof. Zul, if there is any with respect to this guiding principle. Or you want me to proceed to the alternative assessment? Okay, we'll proceed. Okay. So we'll proceed with these slides. I think I have about 15 slides. Okay. Now, we are looking at the alternative assessment, adherence to WP and EA. It is, trust me, it is basically very simple to go to WP and EA. And for all of our POs that we are addressing, we are actually addressing WP and EA. We can go to the next slide. Now, assessment provide adequate feedback to the program to identify strengths and weaknesses for CQI. Under outcome-based education, even though we achieve strength, we still have to go for CQI. Doesn't mean that if it's already strong, we don't have to go for CQI. How can we make it stronger? Okay, and obviously any weaknesses has to be relooked and revisit and review so that it will not fall under weaknesses anymore. So it can go into the strength or probably some opportunity for improvement. So prior to this, we have face-to-face assessment. Now we are going into the alternative assessment. So I give some example of maybe take-home simulation and how do you address teamwork and how you're going to address environment. Okay, for today, I will just discuss on take-home and simulation. And we can always discuss this at any other time later. You can always just email me if you need some clarification on how EAC will look at teamwork and also environment. Most importantly, we are looking at the quality assurance. All of the universities and all of the program has your own internal QMS. So at EAC, at ETAP, we are looking at how you address all the quality assurances and all the CQI that is going to be conducted in your program. Can we look at the next slide? Basically, these are the 2 outcomes. The 2 outcomes looking at how we're going to look at the characteristics of WP and EA and how is the alternative assessment fulfilling the WP and EA characteristic. So I think these are over and over again that you are looking at it. And let me introduce you, there will be another WK coming up. Yeah? Okay, that's a surprise which will be part to the end of the session. Okay, next slide. Well, over and over we are looking at constructive alignment. Why? Because the main core business here is the student. Student must get the learning outcome and they must be facilitated to attain the learning outcome. And how do we ensure that students are getting the learning outcome? We have to go through the assessment. So assessment here is directly impacted through the WP and also EA. So WP is a complex problem And EA is a complex engineering activities. It can come whether in the form of formative or summative, direct or indirect, even at the course level or even at the program level. So most importantly is how is the instruction happening in class. If you are going for PBL, problem-based learning, would your assessment at that point of time going to be formative or is it going to be summative? Probably when you are having your class, it will be more of a formative. Probably at that point of time, PBL, you are looking at teamwork effort. You don't have to really measure at that point that whether they already have attained the teamwork outcome or not, while you are still forming them. So probably you will only gauge it when they are submitting their final year report or their final semester report or the report or the final report for the PBL work. Then only you would gauge their teamwork effort. Or probably some other element, probably ethics. So at the point when they are starting doing their work under the blended learning, right? You would still consider them to say that you must be online. I must see your face. I should not have your video being taken off. I must see your face. So if I have 240 participants here. So all of the 240 participants must show their face. Because I want to check whether you are really there, right? Blended learning will require some kind of online learning. So how will you know whether your students are there? There as in the place where they're supposed to receive learning. They could be there or they could not be there, right? So therefore, you also need to look at the possibility of gauging the ethics part. So probably in the beginning of the semester, in the beginning of the few weeks, you will just look at the formative aspect. But later, you would have to gauge it in terms of the summative component. So we will look at the constructive alignment. Please bear in mind the what, the how to help, and how to know must always be there. And therefore, WP and EA will come in. All right, okay, next. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, you are very familiar with this. Currently, this is what we are dealing with. PO1 right up to PO7 will have its own WK. And all of PO1 to PO7 is the program outcome that have to address complex problem solving or complex problem or complex engineering problem, or known as WP. It has WK. WK is a knowledge profile. And then we have PO number 10, which is communication. PO10 is communication. And PO10 on communication is addressing complex engineering activities. So if you realize WK1 right up to WK7, WK1 right up to WK8 is all being addressed in PO1 right up to PO8. PO8 is not complex, but it has to address WK7. But soon after, in 2021, you will see this change. So therefore, there could be some changes that we need to make in our PO mapping as well. So, but we have to wait until 2021. I'm giving you a preview of what is going to happen. Yeah? Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the slide that contain all the important jargon. Okay, WK, WK1 right up to WK8. And remember, WK1 is natural science. It's no longer physical sciences. It is natural science. And we have mathematics. And then later you will see these mathematics will also change in the 2021. And then we have the engineering fundamentals, specialist knowledge, engineering design, practice, comprehension, and research literature. WP, I think we have already gone through this many times, where WP is the in-depth engineering knowledge which must address WK3, 4, 5, 6, or 8. And WP1 is a must-have. So it is a must-have of all the WKs that we'll see in the column on the left, right? And then some or all. Some or all means some. How many do you consider some? I would take minimum of 2. 2, so anyone between WP2 to WP7. So 2. So I will have 1 coming from WP1, another 2 coming from WP2 to WP7. Anyone, any 2 of those. So in total, each PO will have to address at least 3 WP. That's the minimum. Okay. Similarly with EA, however, EA do not have any compulsory characteristic. It have all the 5 EAs characteristic, but it don't have any compulsory. So you just have to address some or all. Some or all means you can just address 2 or all of them. Minimum is 2. So now, let us give our focus to WP. If you see WP, we have WP2 as conflicting, that is wide-ranging and conflicting. WP3 is no obvious solution. WP4 is infrequently used, familiarity. WP5 is on the codes. WP7 is on stakeholder, that means diverse groups of stakeholders. And WP7 is on the interdependence. Okay, how can we address all of this into our final exam or into our alternative assessment? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, basically this is the gist of everything. PO1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's easy to go with anything on analysis of problems and synthesis of solution. Anything on PO6, PO7, and PO8 is to go on responsibility. So therefore, the mode of questions that you will ask is more on responsibilities. It's best to go, easiest to go on that way. And PO9, PO10, PO11, and PO12, no doubt that some can be done in cognitive domain, especially PO11. But then PO9 and PO10 and PO12 will require the students to be able to show them how they really deal with teamwork. Now, under communication, we have, remember, we have the EA, and communication can go whether it's by verbal or is going to go by presentation. Now, even under 2021 later, communication is being parked on with a larger scope of how to communicate with the stakeholder. It's not just with verbal and paperwork. So, but for now, it is going to be as such. And how do you actually address this as an alternative assessment? And how do you really address them as complex engineering activities? Okay, next. Okay, let's go with the alternative assessment. And we'll go with open book. We'll start first with open book, yeah? So if you go to the next slide. Okay, I am putting this slide again because I need to use this slide together with the other slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, now, supposedly now I have an open book exam. And I am addressing PO2 and PO3. Okay. So if you look under PO2, PO2 would have to address WK1, WK2, WK3, WK4, right? But in PO2, it is also addressing complex problem solving. So we need to address WP1. So which of the WK that can be addressed in PO number 2? So what is PO number 2? PO number 2 is analysis of problem, right? Problem solving. So therefore, what is WK3? WK3 is anything to be on fundamentals, right? And what is WK4? WK4 is on the specialist knowledge. So if I need to address WP1 for PO number 2 in my final exam, and it is an open book exam, therefore, I I must be sure that I am addressing WK3 and WK4. The reason being because it is synonym to PO number 2. Okay. Now, when you talk about what is the next WP that need to be addressed, because you already have addressed WP1, so probably I will look at WP2, which is range of conflicting requirements. And I can also address WP3. What is WP3? Which is the depth of analysis. So if I am looking at my row for PO number 2, I have addressed the minimum expected by EAC. WP1, I am addressing WK3 and WK4. For WP, I am addressing WP2 and WP3. Reason being because it is associated with PO number 2. But then, if the course is also addressing PO number 3, so if you look at PO number 3, what is the compulsory WK that PO number 3 must have? It must have WK5, right? So if it has to have WK5, therefore, I don't have to add any more WK to my WP1 compulsion, because I've already addressed WK5. WP1 says that I must address WK3, WK4, WK5, WK6, and WK8. So if I am addressing PO number 3, it's good enough that I will only cater for WK5. I don't have to measure my WK3 and WK4, even though it is necessary for the students to arrive before they can answer WK5. That's fine. That is indirectly, they need to do all of those prior to getting to WK5. But for the purpose of measurement, they can just go on WK5. Now, what else do I need? You will realize that PO number 3 is addressing on design. So when we are addressing for design, then which is the best WP that we can map it to? Definitely is WP5, because what is WP5? WP5 is extent of applicable codes. When you talk about extent of applicable codes, it mentioned here are outside problems encompassed by standards and codes of practice for professional engineering. Probably if you have this particular question in geotech, and you are asking students to design a reinforced concrete retaining wall, you can also get the student to provide an alternative design to check on the cost, which is cheaper, if they want to go with any reinforced earth retaining wall, or they want to go with any rubble wall, or they want to go with any other method that they thought is possible. And that can be used with respect to using the manufacturing detail. We have so many manufacturers detail that can be used to solve that particular problem. Or probably rather than designing a concrete water tank, why don't they use whatever water tank that is available in the market that can be ready to install? And that installation would require some kind of design before they could actually pre-install all those that is prefabricated water tank. And that would qualify for the W5 under PO number 3. But if you are just addressing WP5, there is only one that you are addressing between WP2 to WP7. So you can choose. You can choose some other WPs. But for this particular exercise, I am suggesting WP2. which WP2 is talking about range of conflicting requirements. So range of conflicting requirement WP2 and WP5 is good enough with WK3 being considered to assess PO number 3 if you're having an open board exam, even if you're having any PBL. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure you are capable of handling the integrity issues here. Because when you're giving anything of a different conflicting requirement, each group will have different requirement, therefore you don't have any issues of them copying each other. Even when you request for a different kind of construction design or any kind of other alternative design, they are using different sort of applicable codes. So that would also address the WK5 and also the WP5. Okay. Similarly, if you look at PO number 6, what is PO number 6? PO number 6 is on, what is PO number 6, Cik Mazda? No, suddenly I've forgotten PO number 6. But PO number 6 is addressing WK7. Okay, PO number 6 is addressing WK7. What is WK7? WK7 is on comprehension. So when you talk about comprehension, okay, what is WP6 and WP7? WP6 is extent of stakeholder involving and level of conflicting requirements. And WP7 is interdependence. So I can look on WPO6, which is addressing WK7. And WK7 is a must-have WK for that particular PO. So if you look in this particular table, I've already highlighted all in blue by saying that all of those are the compulsory PO. Can we move back to the slide before this? Yeah. Okay, on PO number 6. So the PO number 6 is addressing WK7, and PO7 is also addressing WK7, and PO8 is also addressing WK7. So all of these POs which is addressing WK7 is a compulsory WK that must be addressed, and it is on comprehension. So as what I've already given and shown you with an example here on PO6, PO6 on comprehension, I address WP6 and WP7. Why WP6? Because it is stakeholder involvement. So you need to comprehend matters and you need to deliver them to the stakeholders, to diverse group of stakeholders. And also under interdependence, it becomes high-level problems including many components, parts or subparts. So it is important to understand because why comprehension is really necessary for PO6, PO7 and PO8. Okay, now PO8 is definitely on ethics, right? And if you see that some of those that is being addressed in here, basically all the WKs that is being addressed in the POs is a compulsory WKs that had been mentioned basically in our program outcome. So that you don't have to add more of them. If you want to, for instance, like if you want to increase WK instead of just WK7 in PO6, you want to go with WK4, which is on the specialist knowledge, you can. Or if you want to go PO6 with WK8, you still can do it. For now, I am just parking WK7 to it. Even if you just have WK7 for your PO6, it is already valid. And the EAC is already valid because it has addressed one of the component of WP1. The most importantly that you must realize, between PO1 to PO7, it must address WK3 right up to WK8, regardless of where the PO is going to be. Yeah? And then again, if you look at the WP, the other component of WP, WP2 right up to WP7, basically that you will see that 2 WP characteristics is being addressed to each of the POs. I'm not saying that this is cast in stone. You can still change it, but somehow or other, the one in the blue highlights cannot be changed. You can add to top up, yes, But those minimum in the blue highlights cannot be changed for this particular POs, PO3, PO4, PO6, sorry, PO5, PO6 and PO7 and also PO8. Okay, now if you go to the next slide, the next slide would say that on computer simulation. If you are dealing with computer simulation, and what is PO5? PO5 is modern tools. If you are using modern tools and you are using PO5, the must-have is WK6, which is PO on practice-oriented, on practice, engineering practice. So WK6 is engineering practice. So I can still add up some other WK. So in this particular example, I add up WK4. So in PO5, I will have WK4 and I will have also WK6. But I chose to take WP2, WP3, WP4, WP5, WP6, and WP7 for all my computer simulation. Because I may be addressing my computer simulation here for laboratory work. I can also be addressing my computer simulation here for some of the PBL work, maybe some of my final year project work. So therefore PO5 is there. So if you are making these kind of changes in your alternative assessment to address the learning outcome that you are dealing with, then you just need to provide with us the gap analysis as to why you do these changes. Basically, the intended learning outcome should not change. Those particular matters should not change. What may change is your alternative assessment from the current assessment. And then again, as I've already mentioned earlier on, that will be mentioned in the guiding principle, it must not be compromised. The standard and the quality must not be compromised. And it must be seen equivalent to the current assessment that you have actually normally conduct in your program. Okay, next slide. Yeah, this is the surprise. Okay, so they are coming up with the new, well, basically it's not new, it's a revised version of the graduate attribute and professional competency. They were looking under the UNESCO and WAFIO working group. So they have actually set up the working group late last year. And they have met in December, and basically in January 2020, they have already finalized this matter. And they're looking under these 6 themes: accommodate future needs of engineering professionals and the profession, emerging technologies, so therefore under modern tool usage and whatnot, it will be park here together under lifelong learning, emerging and future engineering discipline and practice area, so therefore all the data sciences, this is to accommodate for the 4IR, incorporate the UN sustainable goal. Right, so therefore there will be an assertions to the environment, social, cultural, economic, financial, and global responsibility under our PO7. And then diversity and inclusion include this consideration within ways of working in teams, communication, compliance, environment, legal, etc. systems. And the last one is intellectual agility, creativity, and innovation. So there will be some emphasis on this particular critical thinking. So that will be the basis of the GAPC, the GAPC framework, which I think will be endorsed in 2021. So once it is endorsed, EAC and ETEC will have to rework back our GAPC, our graduate attributes. And we need to be in compliance with what had been discussed and approved by IEA in 2021. Okay, so currently we are still providing feedback to IEA, and soon after we will be able to announce what is really the final version of our GAPC. But let me share the next slide. Okay. We will be having WK1 right up to addition of WK9. Prior to this, WK7 was parked as ethics, under ethics comprehension. Now no longer, it will be under ethical attitude and behavior. This is the new WK that is going to be introduced, and it will be attached to PO number 8, which is on ethics. And then WK8 will now be pushed to lifelong learning. So if we are taking our POs for lifelong learning, now we have to consider WK8 as well. So these are the measures that we need to look at. So investigation will also address WK8, lifelong learning will also address WK8. So that may take place in 2021. So after June 2021, we should be able to see this. And I think EAC will have to be proactive on this measure. Okay, next slide. Okay, basically we are moving into the acculturation of outcome-based education. Because for instance, I believe UiTM, we started way back in the late 90s. And then we were outcome-based education curriculum as early as in the early 2000s. So now this is already 2020. So most of our graduates are already out there, and they should actually be practicing the outcome-based education that we have already nurtured them while they are in the university. So therefore, I take up that we should be going for acculturation of our outcome-based education. For the new program that is on board, we are their big sisters and big brothers. So therefore, we need to assist them accordingly so that they are also on board with us, and we should see this in our society. I think that would be my last slide. Is there any more slide? Yes. Thank you very much, Prof. Zul. And I hope I have already stayed within the 45 minutes that you've already allocated me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Howard. Well, sorry, I keep calling you Prof. Howard.
It's okay.
No problem. To me.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for such an enlightening talk. And there's no better time for this talk than...
Sorry, I can't hear you very well. Yeah, it's not
sorry.
loud enough.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Okay. Okay, there's no better time for such a talk like this on this topic today with the situation that we are in. But of course, we have already reached the end of the semester, and I presume whatever we have heard today, we can benefit for the next or coming semester, which probably we will still be doing our ODL for next semester. So this will be very useful, inshallah, for us for the coming semester. So far, we have one question for you, Dr. Zaki. The first question is, if we record due to connectivity, some of the students are unable to attend during class time. Does that consider as a face-to-face?
Say that again, if record?
If we record due to connectivity problem, I presume, right? Some of the students are unable to attend during the actual class time. Does that consider as a face-to-face session?
Okay, the face-to-face session would definitely have interaction, right? So we expect anything that we do face-to-face, even if you do online as such, and if you have no problem with connectivity, internet connectivity, and you are capable of getting the questions rightly, and you are capable of discussing it online, that is still considered as face-to-face. It is not just online as in nature, because online when you deal with blended learning, some of the activities are done on some of the activities or some of the learning process are done on pre-recorded version, right? For instance, like what we're having now, some of these participants are watching the YouTube channel or maybe your FB channel, but they are unable to communicate directly with us, in a sense, unless they are just communicating through the chat room, right? So that particular communication of chat room may not be considered as a full face-to-face, even though they are still asking you questions. There is some interaction happening, but that face-to-face activity is not really there. as in compared that we are doing what we're doing now in terms of Zoom or Google Meet, and I can still see you on the face and we can still discuss and I can still see your body language. But for those people who are just doing in a chat room, that is not possible to see whether that they are really fully understand on what is really happening. But then again, interaction do happen. It is still dynamic. But to say that it is full on a full face-to-face, I will not consider as so. The reason being because there are social impact to when we are gathering in a particular, one particular meeting group. Because you will see there will be small discussion happening from one small group to another group. This activity will not happen. They may happen in the chat, but they may not really physically happen. And there are some social impact to it as well that you need to really look into. Does that answer the question?
Well, I hope so.
Okay, I hope so.
The next question we have here is from Ughaneshwari Balanyandi. Her question is, what is the maximum student numbers in a group for laboratory work through online learning?
Oh, well, we have already mentioned that any laboratory work has to be a maximum of 5. That is meant for engineering program. For anything of technology and diploma students, they have to be smaller number than 5. We go for 3 or maximum of 4, but we definitely would like to go for 3 depending on the availability of the equipment and how difficult it is to handle the equipment. But it will not be to have more than 3 or 4 for the technology and diploma program. But in terms of when you see that if you want to conduct lab and how can you do lab online and how you want to teach lab online? By right, we don't teach lab online. Students will have to do their lab. So how does the student do their laboratory work online? Are you giving them some kind of simulation work that need to be done and they need to do it together? And how is that connectivity going to happen between one student to another if it's going to be done online? Teaching would definitely go with what we are doing as what we're doing in lecture, and then maybe probably we do some kind of a case study if they are going to do some kind of discussion, then it's possible to have it as online discussion. Unless you are saying that you are having an online discussion with your students, and if it's going to be done in a group, then it should not be more than 5 if it's for laboratory session.
Okay, the next question I have from Syed Jamaluddin, Syed Hakim. Would you please do some explanation about open-ended questions in the exam?
Open-ended questions will definitely be, for instance, if you have, if you utilize WP2. WP2 means range of conflicting requirements, right? So it involves wide range and conflicting technical, engineering, and other issues. I may be giving some question that may have a very standard opinion for that particular question. But then again, in order to make it range of conflicting requirement, I may add in as what if. What if the depth is now double? What if the length is now half? What if the diameter of the reinforcement is now double? Doubling the diameter doesn't mean that the volume is double, right? So therefore, all of these need to be addressed differently. And you can always make that particular question to be open-ended when you give different variable to each different question, to each different group of students. So they will have to address different variables for a different scenario. And when they are coming up with the answer, definitely they have to come up with certain assumptions. So your questions will now no longer be standard. You don't have a standardized answer. What you have is the standardized way of arriving to the answer. not a standard answer that probably you will say that, okay, the FCU has to be so and so. No. Probably if they say that they want to they want to shorten the length of the beam, and if they want to double the size of the reinforcement, and probably they may use a weaker strength concrete rather than going for FCU 35, they can go with FCU 30. So that would have an implication in the cost. You can also ask for what is the cost. How do you ensure that it's cost effective? You can first start off with X number of costs and get them to work backwards. That is also an open-ended. Okay?
Okay, I think we have another question here from the YouTube or Facebook audience. Do we really
You only ada Facebook, ada YouTube, ada apa lagi? IG pun ada.
Do we really need to include the WP in all questions in the assessment, or only require certain percentage of questions to comply with WP?
Okay, that is depending on how the university look at the compliance of WP. Some universities, some program may have certain percentage to be addressed, because some program may look at the attainment of PO1 for year 1 will be basic and fundamental. So therefore, you may only address WP in probably 30% of your assessment. The remaining 70% will just go on higher Bloom taxonomy. Okay, but then again, if PO1 is also addressed in year 3 and year 4, definitely your WP has to increase in terms of the percentage. At EAC, we are not going to look at how many percent you are going to address. What we want to see is, do show us the evidences of WP and do show us the evidences of EA. There is no right and wrong. It depends so much on how you want to address your WP and EA. We are giving that flexibility to the universities and how to handle them. But then again, under our EAC Standard 2020, we really want to see the WK being evident out, WP evident out, and EA being evident out. So when you are showing us the PO trace or the PO files or whatever, PO booklet or whatever, online PO or whatever, we would like to see where is WP being addressed. That is good enough to us. We will not prescribe how many percent it should be. Okay?
That's a very good answer.
Thank you.
Question that comes from IRTS, Dr. 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗨𝗏𝗪. May I have your opinion on the suitable assessment method or criteria for teamwork in ODL?
Oh, you want to ask my opinion for that? I was trying to get some ideas on how universities are actually dealing with that. OEL.
Sorry, ODL, Prof.
Sorry?
ODL. Not
ODL. Oh, online distance learning. Okay. Well, that is really something that I've seen some programs. What they want the students to show is actually evidences of their WhatsApp discussion. Well, if I am the one who's going to deal with it, I would actually require them to do some kind of a Zoom discussion. Because rather than using WhatsApp, why don't they use Zoom? Because the students are getting, I think, 40 minutes free, and they can easily extend it out. And whatever that they discuss on the Zoom can be recorded, and that recorded version can actually be sent to the lecturers. And to see, that is one way of doing things, yeah, in terms of the discussion for ODL. Other than that, I haven't thought so of any other which is more lucrative enough, other than this particular video conferencing meeting that they can have among the students themselves. Probably at the end of the day is for you to see on Well, there is one program that actually shared with me. What they do is the facilitator, I mean the lecturer, would interview the students on Zoom, probably on Zoom or on Google Meet, and he interviewed all of them, and he asked pertinent questions to the report that they have already submitted. So that is to also check on how the teamwork effort has actually been done throughout the assignment. Okay.
Okay, the next question is from Ruqayyah Ismail. She says, Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Assalamualaikum.
To your slide, PO versus WP mapping. If you say PO2 is mapped to WK3 and WK4, it's a course that is mapped to PO2. Must have both WKs, or can it be only one WK? And other WK is considered in other course that is also mapped to PO2.
Okay, see, when you talk about PO1, when you talk about PO1, when we are looking at WK3 and WK4, WK3 is looking at the engineering fundamentals. Okay, in PO1 alone, it already has the WK1 and WK2. WK1 is on the natural science and WK2 is on mathematics. That is not counted as part and parcel of WP. So WP1 is looking at anything above WK3. So if I would like to address the PO1 to only WK1, I can still go ahead with do that. I don't have to address WK3 and WK4. In the example, I may give you WK3 and WK4, but in the second example of PO2, I may not touch WK3, I'll just only touch WK4. It can also be done in that manner. So long as in between PO1 to PO7, you must address all the 8 WKs. Sorry, all the 6 WKs. Yeah, WK3, WK4, WK5, WK6, WK7, and WK8. Between PO1 to PO number 7. Okay?
Okay, we don't have any further question at the moment. So I've got a question to pose you, Prof. With your exposure with or meetings with other universities of late, what do you see as some of the main challenges that universities are facing during this pandemic time or pandemic period with regards to what we're talking about today, adherence to complex problems, engineering activities?
Okay, one of the main issue that universities are facing is basically the connectivity of the internet. That means they cannot get 100% of their students connected to the internet. Students may be using their phone and the infrastructure also may not be good. Their notebook also may not be good. So there's a lot of issues in terms of the infrastructure alone. So that's the reason why many of them would still prefer to stay on campus because they know that they can get the connectivity. Now, secondly, lecturers are saying that if they have given certain kind of activity to be done, you may not be able to capture whether really the students are doing it or they are just fulfilling it based on what needs to be done. So most importantly here is to realize how can you really connect with the student. Are you really in contact with your student, asking, are you having any problem with the online learning? Can you understand the online learning? Because to some students, they may not be able to hear your voice properly. We don't have to go far. Even within our own Zoom meeting with our own council member, some of our council can even, we're just within Klang Valley and we still cannot get a proper sound. And you will have a lot of issues in trying to understand certain matters. Okay. What more if it's with students, where you need to share a lot of documents? If you need to share a lot of pictorial or schematic diagram that need to be uploaded, and when you have a weak internet connection, then that would be a big issue. Let me share with you my daughter, who has to take her final exam during this MCO period. She was given a 4-hour exam, but the duration given to her was 24 hours. So from the time she download her examination paper until she upload the examination answers, it has to be done within 24 hours, even though the examination paper is only 4 hours. And that is showing that they are giving that particular buffer zone for the students to be able to download and upload their answer. Now, have you made any study on whether that kind of facilities can be done in Malaysia? If our students is not just within our city area, if our students is abroad in Sabah and Sarawak, over the sea, or probably those who are staying in some remote area, we can go as far as Pahang. They can go to the remote area in Pahang and you still can't get the internet connection, right? So how are they going to deal with this? How do you make arrangement, for instance, that diploma student having to do laboratory work and they are already now back home? How are they going to do their laboratory work? Have we made any kind of mutual collaboration with any polytechnics nearby their place so that they can still do the laboratory work? For instance, Pinang and Seberang Perai, Polytechnic Seberang Perai dengan UiTM Pinang. Can they actually work together and accommodate some other students from other parts that would be able to address this as well? So those are the things that you need to look at and you need to also address when you talk about how to go about in identifying the internet connectivity. Now, other than online issues is integrity issues. To the extent that some of them would think that it is best to just give them exam that is on multiple choice. But then again, how do you really want to control the multiple choice exam? And some lecturers are saying that student has to show their environment by putting up the video on circular mode to see what is the condition in their room that they are staying. Where is the door, so that they will be able to know if the student is leaving the room. And students are not allowed to off their video when they are taking the exam. That means student must be at all time putting on their video, and the lecturer would have to monitor from them. If you have 20 students, then it's okay. But if you have like 231 students like this, how can you monitor one after another? It's not possible. And there's also another WhatsApp, all other form of communication that can be done. So those, the main two issues here is the integrity, and the other issues is in terms of the internet connectivity. Other than that, if you want to go with the PBL, where you want to go with continuous exam, I know there are some places in UK would actually abolish their final exam and just give grades based on their continuous exam, on continuous assignment, continuous work. So therefore, that's the grade for them. But I believe for the final year student, they still have to do some PBL before they could actually, even though they could not do the final exam. So that depends so much on how you want to tackle all of these problem with respect to internet connectivity and also with integrity.
Okay, Dr. Siti, we got another question here from
Dr. Siti.
Yeah.
Hold on. A question from
Can you hear me?
I think Prof. Zul is saying something. Prof. Zul, Prof. Nolita is saying something.
Phone forward. Mike?
Yeah. Can I illustrate what Prof. Siti is saying just now? Or
Okay,
give an example?
Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Okay. In the case of FKE, what we did is just after MCO started, what we did is that we did a table where the students have to fill up their connectivity, the devices that they have, and all that. So what happened is the lecturers will work within students that have the lowest connectivity and the lowest capability. So Zoom is for me, in my case, Zoom is totally out because I have so many students in places like Kelantan, Terengganu, and therefore I think we need to actually at the start of any of well, next semester also we will probably ask the student for their profile in terms of their devices, how old their devices are, and their connectivity, and then we decide how we work with them online. That is probably the main thing that has to be done.
Yeah, that is a good move actually. You really need to get feedback from your students. How is their internet connectivity? Because without a good at least the minimum level of internet connectivity, then whatever online learning that you are doing will not be able to reach the other end, and therefore students, not all students are going to get the intended learning outcome that you anticipate them to get.
And then we have some subjects where in the finals, I mean, they're doing exams, as they say, they're giving the students 6 hours. So those are to take care of students who couldn't get connectivity throughout the whole day. So the only thing is to be careful of how you phrase your question and how you ask your questions.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think from Nolita, UiTM
Yes.
has already developed, I think, an application that could actually detect our students' degree of connectivity.
Yes, yes.
Connectivity. So I
Correct.
think actually now use that application.
Yeah, but then that only the application was only introduced 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
So we couldn't do it. So yeah, we did it on the 3rd week of March, where we had to work very fast to know how to interact with our students and to be fair to every student. So we have, if other faculties would like to have, we have a system called ARIS. So maybe have a look at it. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. You can share with them then.
Yeah, of course it's available.
Okay.
Okay, Prof, we've got another question here.
Sure.
Mr. Leong Kang. Okay, he said, so this is how I plan my continuous assessment. May I get Prof. Siti Howard's comment on this? Okay. He informed the students about the 1-hour assessment, that is the progress test, at least a week ago or a week before, duration 1 to 2 p.m. The questions only released at 12:55 p.m. Students need to on their camera online by Microsoft Teams or Google Meet, so that recording can be carried out by course lecturer. Students are only given 5 minutes to submit the answer script through sending in within cut-off time. This submission will not be submitted. You understand?
I wouldn't be able to comment in terms of the rigidity of how you conduct your assessment in that nature to ensure the integrity is upheld. Frankly speaking, I will still give some class to the student. They are adult, they are mature. We expect them to behave as an adult. But then again, I would be tackling the matter by providing them with open-ended question, which would be easier for me to tackle, and I think I can reduce the integrity issues to the minimum, and I can really ensure that there will not be any copying from one to another. I will make use of WP2. I can also make use of the other WP2 is on the range of completing requirement, or I can go with WP3, which is depth of analysis required. I can request them to even proceed with some kind of simulation because I'm giving them continuous assignment, and I can give them up to maybe probably 1 week or 2 weeks of work, which will require them to do some simulation. Probably the easiest would go to ask them to provide a template using Excel. And then when they submit to me the Excel template, then I will just key in whatever variables that could be in, and that could be a good way of identifying whether they are doing the right thing or not. Or if there is a copying of Excel template, there are means and ways in how to look at the template. So I think I wouldn't be so rigid in terms of the time because this connectivity issues can happen just at the, at the prick of a fingertip, because you can have blackouts, you can have lots of things, and it's not really predictable whether you can really have a good connectivity at any time. I wouldn't really be able to really comment whether that is really the right move or not right move. But at the end of the day, you should know better. You should be able to address your WPs accordingly, and you should be able to address the integrity issues among your students accordingly, inshallah. I think Prof. Nolida got to mute your...
Oh, sorry, I forgot about that.
Thank you.
Okay, Prof. Howard, no questions so far. No further questions.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. Prof, again, I would like to ask your observation. So far, most universities resorting to actually open-ended exams, open book exams or open-ended exams, or are they actually transferring the assessment to projects and assignments from your observation?
Okay. If the final exam or the assessment is now being taken in as a PBL or any kind of case study or open-ended exam, as you mentioned, I would applaud to that. But then the WP component must also be seen in that particular kind of exam. It should not be in a way that it can easily be plugged from the internet and everything is already there. So therefore, the person or the facilitator or the lecturer who's actually preparing the open-ended exam has to be creative themselves. They should be able to look into different sorts of variables that would make their students think, rather than just Googling certain keywords into the internet and they are given with such and such answer. It all goes back to the facilitators or the exam provider.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Prof. I think one of the biggest challenges that we see right now is actually developing the exam questions.
Exactly.
The project assignments that would actually incorporate the complex engineering problem as well as the engineering activity. The complex engineering problems. That is one. From the question or the assignment, incorporating the elements.
Exactly.
Another part is, of course, the assessment, creating the rubrics that not only can be used effectively to measure or assess the objectives of the assignment, example, but as well as assessing the achievement of the complex problem-solving skills. I think this is what we are personally observing as one of the biggest challenges. So any comments on that?
Okay, with respect to the preparation of the rubrics, I think I have shared earlier on the rubrics design. Depends on, I think recently with Monash, we also shared some rubrics design. And what we deal with was to go back on what is the expectation of our WP characteristics and our EA characteristics. So we work backwards based on those characteristics, because if you look at all the expectation of the characteristics, they are quite in demand. For instance, like when you see outside problems encompassed by standards and codes of practice for professional engineering, that means looking at WP5. So how do you address WP5 rubrics? Are you just looking at what kind of standards and codes of practice for professional engineering are you looking at? So we really have to give a deep thought on what kind of code of practice. Are we just going to look at the normal code of practice that we have? Probably we have, for instance, like in Monash, the students actually being taught using the Australian standard. So we were saying, if you want to use WP5 as part and element of your measurement in your WP, why don't you get the students to now design using the Euro code, or even to look at some of the Malaysian standard? Because students will be working in Malaysia. Their learning is all based on the Australian standard. So those are evidences of how they can actually move on. But then again, how do you want to translate all of this in your rubrics? So rubrics must really be designed together. Probably it is not possible to just design by a person. So you really need to work in a team. So I think the faculty has like 4 main division, 4 main center of learning. So therefore you can actually create the rubrics in that nature based on the studies, based on the center of studies. So then it can always relate back to the WP's component. And that can be used in terms of the basis as to how you can go for the rubrics, so that you can measure the intended learning outcome that need to be measured. And I think Dr. Liu has also come up with some presentation of papers, and then he has published some papers in terms of rubrics that can also be seen. And I think I will share that with Dr. Mazda for those kind of rubrics, and then we can actually share with you guys.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, sure.
PM Zul, I just want to read something from the Facebook. There's a compliment from Engineer Chu. Good sharing, Dr. Engineer Siti. It will help the ACCULTs to strengthen their understanding in this subject. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is Chu Beng Lai. I think he's one of the panel. He's one of the industry panel that is very proactive. He has been joining all of these webinars for himself to understand what is actually WP, what is EA, and that's very good. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've already almost reached 11:45. Okay, unless anyone has anything to ask, we can actually reach or stop our seminar or webinar today. So any other questions, last minute? Anyway, Dr. Siti, I totally agree with you. For those who are having difficulty or challenges in creating the 10 questions and the assignments, to actually fulfill the complex problem requirements, they can actually look at the WPs that they are actually addressing, and they can work backwards.
Yes.
Be very creative.
Yeah. Right? Exactly. That's very true.
And I think for everyone, we would like to share that our committee, our complex problem committee in UiTM, we are actually compiling the project and assignments that we have moderated to make sure that they are fulfilling the complex problem requirements, and also helping lecturers to actually develop effective assessment rubrics. And we're compiling all this in hopefully in a book, and we hope to publish it by October, hopefully. And hopefully this can help many of us to look at examples of how these things can be done. Although different field or different areas, the topics might be different, but I think the concept remains the same.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think with
Very
it,
good. Yeah, very good.
And we would like to invite Prof. Howard to be our editor.
Dr. Siti, one last question here.
Mm.
From FB, Dr. Siti Howard, I would like to ask your opinion on changing the assessment from 60% final assessment, 60% final exam and 40% continuous assessment into 30% test, 30% assignment 1, 30% assignment 2, and 10% quiz during the COVID-19.
Well, as already mentioned, any alternative assessment that is to be undertaken by the university, by the program, must undergo the internal QMS. If the internal QMS is happy with you not having any final exam, everything is to be done on PBL, everything is to be done on the continuous assessment, test 1, test 2, and test 3, that's fine. But then again, just be cautioned, CPC must still be adhered to. CPC means the condition for passing courses. Yeah? Even though you're not having any final exam, that's fine with us. But be sure CPC is being adhered to. Under EAC, which is different with ETech and which is different with the technology and the diploma program, under EAC, we have CPC, condition for passing courses. So if you don't have any final exam, then how do you ensure that students really attain to the level of that particular learning outcome? I just need to caution you that. I'm not saying that you can't do it, you can. You definitely can. You just want to go with test 1, test 2, and test 3. But what is the level of your test 1? What is the level, the depth and breadth of your test 1? What is the depth and breadth of your test 2 and test 3? So just be in mind, bear in mind that we need to cater for the CPC and the WPs. As long as you work backwards and you want to do your continuous assessment using the WP component, I think you're already there. You have nothing to worry about not having any final exam. That's fine. That's okay. Yeah.
Dr. Siti.
Yes.
I think, thank you, Dr. Siti. I think we've reached the end of our webinar.
Thank you very much.
And I thank you for spending time with us. And I hope you will be able to join us again in our upcoming webinar series.
Okay,
and,
no problem.
All of you who are in this session today, we also welcome you to join us in our future webinar series, where we will go into more detail into the implementation of complex problem solving and engineering activities in teaching and learning and assessment methods. So, to all of you, I thank you again for spending your time to join us in this webinar session this morning. So, for those of you who wish to get your e-certificate for your attendance, please do register, and please also fill up this short survey that we have prepared for you. This will be very helpful for us to make an assessment of where we are right now with respect to the topic that we're talking about today. I think that is about it for today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Congratulations to the faculty. Congratulations to all the team. And it's nice to be able to share with the session with UiTM. Alhamdulillah. You know, after 3 years.
Sekejap je masa berlalu, Prof. 3 tahun.
Oh yes. Well, the 3 years that I leave the university has been very enriching, and Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy. Alhamdulillah. And it's good to be back, just to share this particular session. So looking forward to more of UiTM members to be on board EAC and ETech. I really welcome all of you here. And please do join us on our upcoming training of the new panel. So I think especially the young ones and not so young ones, that's fine. Because we do have some of those who are actually going into retirement, and now they feel that they have the time that they can accommodate, and they come in for our upcoming training. They have already registered for our upcoming training. Inshallah, our upcoming training should be in November, I think. November, October or November. Just keep track of that. Inshallah. Yeah, Prof. Zul, you are invited in as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So many
Thank you, Prof.
questions that other people have on their mind. And I think we'll proceed with more of these sessions that will be very useful for all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you again to everyone.
Okay, thank you. Terima kasih, Zul. Ya,
Have a good day.
Assalamualaikum.
Okay, terima kasih Prof. Bye. See you.
Okay.